Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Ogti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ogti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today. And thanks everybody for listening and also watching. Again, we're also on YouTube.
Pretty soon you have to kind of drop that. We've gotten enough content onto YouTube that it's now just a normal thing.
I hope so. Yeah, well, I'm wondering, do we need to transition users from like our podcast to our YouTube? Are people moving over? I guess the data will give us some guidance on that.
Yeah, let's wait 6 months and then figure it out. Let's do the thing and then figure out the rest later.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so I think we'll make this part 3 of our last 2 discussions. Started with Trishul introducing me to ChatGPT, and we went down a rabbit hole of what makes humans and free will and the philosophies of like determinism. Last time we did kind of practical implications of ChatGPT and other AI technologies, and we're gonna have even more fun and kind of creativity, imagination of trying to look a couple generations out. So part of the premise of this conversation is we can imagine that robots, whether it's AI or actual mechanical robots, can show empathy, that they can mimic human feelings. And so maybe financial advisors at their current level of service to clients could be replaced. I'd say like things like CPAs could be replaced, where it's a lot of just like data collection and filing taxes that can be replaced by technology. Trishul brought up the idea that AI is starting to do some coding, and so maybe some level of engineering could be replaced. We've seen reports that robots and AI can do a better job of reading MRI scans than doctors. They can be more effective. So maybe they advance and get better at diagnoses. They can read every report that's ever been written and find every case of what's the most likely thing that this particular ailment is. Trishul brought up the idea that lawyers could be replaced because we no longer need humans to look for precedent. We can already have our AI lawyer research every historical case that's ever happened and present arguments based on that. So that's kind of the premise of this conversation, that we can start to imagine, maybe a couple generations away, that certain professions could be replaced by AI. So I wanted to break this conversation into 2 parts. One is a little more kind of fun and interesting. The other is a little more, if we can plan 2 generations out for society, what might be some things that we're on the path now, and kind of a little more, I don't say practical because we can't choose what society should do, but at least some actual ideas. So Trisha, I kind of want to start with the fun one because it's like just on top of my mind, but I'll let you choose. Do you want to go down the practical path or the fun path first?
I don't know if I have a choice here. Who would choose practical over fun? Are you leading the witness? I don't know if.
You know what? I guess I have notes written down for the fun part, and I have like counter arguments written for the practical part.
Okay. I'll take fun for 200, Alex.
Okay. So, the first kind of big question is trying to imagine if so many of these professions could be replaced, what professions wouldn't be replaced? And so I had things like, just from my own personal life, would a ski instructor be replaced? So we went to the mountain this past weekend with my son. He did ski lessons. Would a ski instructor be replaced? And that's an extension of, would ski patrol be replaced? The people on the lift to help you make sure you get on, make sure if you fall, they can stop the lift. There's like a kind of a variety of that idea, but it's outdoor recreation. Could those types of things be replaced? I have been watching a lot of playoff football, and I was wondering, could professional athletes be replaced, or would the entertainment that the best humans doing this thing that I love to do and I enjoy watching that, is there still like societal value there? And so I enjoy watching professional athletes. And the kind of extension, like you could see singers and other entertainers and movie actors and TV actors, like would those things be replaced? And I my guess is you might be able to replace some of the uh, actual actors with computer AI or computer graphics. So maybe like, would stage actors still have a place in the world? Would there still be a desire for that human element? And then as I was thinking about like movies, like what about the like director and the writer of the movies? And we're starting to see some algorithms that might be able to actually write that. And so what about, again, like the director, like who designs or who creates the feel of the movie that appeals to people in ways that other movies don't? Like what makes movies successful that like certain directors can capture, and what makes other movies unsuccessful? And then I got back. It's like, you know what? I think I need to get some more new snowboard boots. And so I go into the store. Like I'll probably get them this summer. I don't need until next winter. But like, my boots are sold. They now have these like click-on boots that I might try next time instead of strapping on. And like, who comes up with the innovations like that? Of you go back 10, 15 years ago, and like no one was asking for these things, but certain people were like making kind of capitalistic bets that if I create this thing that people enjoy, then there will be a demand for it. And so there's been enough like really successful entrepreneurs of people create a thing. So the individual creates a thing that people didn't even know they wanted. And I wonder, like, could AI or like replace that? I don't want to say, I feel like a kind of creativity idea of like, who designs the snowboard boots? That like, I don't, that's a very weird phrase, but this is my train of thought as I was trying to prepare for our conversation today. And I, I I'm really curious. Like, my guess would be there might actually like be two levels of professional athletes. Like there might actually be like the robot athletes, but also the human athletes that play separately, and like there's still an appreciation for the human athletes playing. But because I think, and it comes out to like there's just a little bit of that like creativity and talent that people appreciate. And I do think that stage actors will still exist. Will a sommelier still exist? Like, oh, based on what you said, here's a wine that tastes well. And maybe like, would a chef, which is the same idea as that, like the snowboard boot clicking, like who creates the new type of meal that's experimentation to figure out who, like, yes, people like this, or no, this is horrible. So I know I went on a whole long thing that's like, I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks now, but just that idea of if AI exists and can kind of replace a large number of professions, what either can't it replace, or what wouldn't it replace? So based on it's a list or things that kind of, if I talk long enough for you to come up with your own, what do you think?
All right, so there's a good amount to unpack there. I think just starting at a high level, I get the feeling on a long enough timeline, pretty much everything is on the chopping block. Meaning, given enough time, there's no reason why some sort of robot / AI thing can't do anything, that a human could do, in my mind. For example, 50, 100, 1,000 years from now, robots walking around that look just like humans and that are doing all the things that humans do might be, just commonplace, right? So what likely will happen is, over generation by generation, things will evolve and more things will end up on the chopping block. For example, in the last generation, a lot of the advances in technology have come from automation, right? Robots or technological robots, right? Coding robots. I mean, software in addition to hardware, making things more efficient. Way in the beginning, it was just simple robots like, screwing things or whatever that they do on the assembly line, right? Very mechanical or very rote. But those were previously done by humans, right? That there was a human's job on the assembly line to do this or that or whatever, right? All day. And a lot of the advancements that we've seen has made that a lot more efficient, right? And then what we've seen also over the last generation is this big advancement in software and engineering that has led to, like the internet revolution, the connectivity of knowledge and devices and all of that, which has made things, an order of magnitude more efficient from that perspective. And what that has led to is a lot of people who were doing things that were more manual, either those jobs have been completely eliminated, or basically that person is now able to do the work of 5 or 10 people in the past. I even think, in our practices, Aaron, there's so much we're doing with automation that we kind of even take for granted, right? Imagine an advisory business 20, 30 years ago where mailing statements, to our clients, and our clients are taking half a day off from work to drive to meet us with a stack of paper, and we're sifting through documents. We have a secretary just to make sure our calendar is efficient. That one position has been obsoletized by Calendly, right? Like our scheduling tools that we use. So even in the practices that we do today, imagine that excess overhead that we would have to pay for, and therefore our clients would have to pay for, just to keep our businesses on par with what was expected in the past. And there's just myriad of other things. So in the next generation, it seems like there will be many things that we similarly take for granted with humans that are quite cost prohibitive, that the first generation of these artificial intelligent machines can help replace. So, I think, just talking about the initial things, it's stuff that we've kind of already been seeing and we talked about last time. I can kind of flip through some other stuff that came up. And honestly, I haven't even really been looking for this stuff, but it's just kind of showing up on my streams and whatnot. So, I can kind of share what's there.
Okay.
That's a good real-time glitch you heard there. Let's see here. All right. So, for example, we mentioned music, right? There's an initiative by Google. Let me share the screen here. Okay, so this is Google's Music LM initiative.
Okay.
And it's basically creating music, right? Based upon textual inputs. And they actually have some samples here, so I can play a thing or two. So this is the caption. This one, we hear a choir singing a Gregorian chant and a drum machine and a music beat, and this is all generated by the AI. Let me rewind it here. Aaron, let me know if you can hear this. Thumbs up.
Yep, I can.
Okay, so there's plenty more. People can check it out. We'll put the links. But the idea is this was generated without a human composing it, where you have all these different tracks and layers and stuff like that. That's kind of created without all the musical acumen that a human would have to bring to the table to assemble this type of composition. And it's created all these things across many different genres and with different instruments and musics and vocals and stuff like that. So here we are. This is today.
So I guess that's kind of my question of like the movie director, movie producer, but like who provides the input of I want this kind of music for this scene, because I can imagine like you can digitize the actor, like you can, and I can imagine like you can get in the script, you can get like the facial cues and they can get the emotions right, because we're projecting that they can show empathy and emotions, but like who tells them which emotion for this scene?
Right. So level 1 is Gen 1, right? Have the AI generate the score. And what you might say to what the director or producer or whoever may say to who's ever writing the score would be some sort of guidance, right? That same type of guidance would go to the AI. For example, the description for one of these clips,
the epic one instead of the Gregorian chant.
Right. So the epic one said, create a soundtrack that builds musical tension and creates a sense of urgency, right? So you can see how if that's what the script calls for, then the music will correspond to that based upon what's generated. Now, on the flip side, the script itself, you can ask the AI, give me a script that builds tension and creates a sense of urgency with two characters doing this and that, right? And it will do that.
Yeah. So again, I can imagine like each individual component.
Right.
It's like, but again, it's like who tells, give me the script that builds tension.
Right.
And like I think there's that's one of the things like I can't, maybe I just can't imagine that level of AI, but that idea of like storytelling. Who creates a new story that is actually interesting, that a lot of people want to hear that story.
Well, there you go. So you can tell the AI, give me 60,000 words in the flavor of Hemingway about something that happens, in the Midwest with characters that are animals, right? And who knows, maybe the first pass won't be as great, but you can imagine if it's possible, right? If it's computationally possible, right? It can happen. And, I think in terms of...
So maybe if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not necessarily okay. This is actually like YouTube generation kind of thing. It's like it's not necessarily a director saying, I want all these inputs, give me this script with this flavor. Like again, it comes back down to who tells the AI to give me the Hemingway style versus a high fantasy style. Like who tells that? And I can actually see like it's the end consumer. It's like each individual person can tell the AI, here's what I want to consume.
Yeah.
And it comes up with the script and the score and the animation. And so it's everyone can kind of create their own movie using AI, but kind of like on YouTube, some of them will appeal to a larger population, and those are the ones that get spread broadly. But it's not that director is a job. It's everyone gets to be their own movie creator.
Yeah, like you can imagine the end game where you go to Netflix, right? And based upon what you watch, it suggests other things that you
Yeah.
might like. Well, that's the director now, right? It figures
Yeah.
out what you might like. It go ahead and makes it out of thin
Yeah.
air, and it serves it to you in real time.
But it's my individual choices or preferences
Yeah, but
that
you're not
are the inputs.
exactly, but you're not telling it to do it. It's just
Yeah.
doing it for you based upon your viewing patterns and what you
Yeah.
seem to focus your attention on.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I can kind of see that. It's not that like movie director and playwright, like while it still kind of fits my idea, like you need a human for the initial, so for some kind of input. I want this style. So at some level, I think you need a human input. But if it's, and then everything else is generated automatically by technology, and I think we're all seeing that, like some will be popular, some won't.
Yeah, like you can imagine, and this is how social media sites operate today, right? They serve you up things to keep your attention on the social media sites. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily what you want, but it's what they think you want that will keep you on the website, and they probably know what you want, what will keep you on the website better than you, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of
And
controversy around that in the recent history.
yeah. So yeah, it's just the through your own behavior. Here's something you recommend, and then
Yeah.
if you wanted, you can manually change that. It's like, oh, I'm actually curious what it would look like as a Western, not as a sci-fi.
Yeah, you'll have a menu and then you
Yeah.
can navigate around that menu, but it's basically an infinite menu. However
Yeah.
much content you want, it'll be there.
Yeah. Okay, so I am comfortable with the idea that movie directors getting paid millions of dollars by a movie studio, that could be gone far enough in the future.
Well, what we just described is basically the entire entertainment industry. Right?
Yes.
So, the music, the producing, the scores, the actors, the directing, everything.
Okay. So going back, like what about, so this is more of your, I don't have your guess. Would you go to a concert put on by a robot singing artificial created song?
I think what this is probably going to come down to is whatever we end up liking, right? If the caliber of entertainment that we get from these machines is on par or even better than what the humans bring to the table, right? But I mean that at the end of the day, that might be all it takes.
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of a few things. Sounds like the ski instructors, like, yeah, we'll have a robot that knows how to ski and has the cameras to make observations and tell you, here's the next thing you need to work on to get better.
Yeah.
So okay, so you like, yes, we'll have a robot that skis. Next thing would be the movie director, the actors, the screenwriter, the person who creates the score, the musicians, like those can all be replaced as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, going back to that professional athlete, like I even wrote down, like, what about like a coach or a GM? And again, if the ski instructor can be automated, then coach for technique can be automated, and general manager who selects the players, they can like have a better evaluation process, better inputs. If you go through either watching all their previous film or watching certain drills that they do, like based on athleticism, to get enough inputs, that can also be automated. But then I come back to like that entertainer idea of like whether it's professional sports or a singer, like what brings the crowd together. Because I think that's a very human thing, just like the feeling the energy of being in the crowd. And so I am curious of like what do you think brings the crowd together?
So I think there's a few dynamics going on here. One is the robots and AIs and automation, right? They're going to put a lot of competitive pressure on what the humans are doing, right? And the value that the humans can bring to the table. For example, if you can host an AI-driven concert that's on the same caliber, but that star performer robot gets paid $10 versus, the megastar human needs to be paid a lot more, then it makes it a lot hard to compete in that space, meaning it's a lot harder to monetize those types of professions where humans and robots are kind of side by side. And we've seen this in other areas already, right? Where humans and robots are doing things very similarly, and it's putting downward price pressure on what the humans are able to earn from these types of positions.
So this might be a segue to the next half of the conversation, because I can see, just like when you go to a movie theater and watch a movie, everything on that can be replaced by AI. Everything on that screen. Okay. And a movie ticket costs you $15 these days. But you can also go see a play on a stage, and the ticket will cost you somewhere between $100 and $500. And you're kind of paying for that scale idea of, if they're going to create a show on stage that's spectacular enough to go see that show instead of going to a movie, they can't scale it across thousands of movie theaters. So they have to make enough for each individual show of the limited number of seats in the theater. And I can see that like splitting going farther, that you can go see the robot perform, and because the robot only costs $10 and the electricity is free, and like there's nothing, the cost for that type of concert could be a lot lower, but I think there would still be people who want to see the live singer, and they'll pay a significant premium to do that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but that's a great analogy that you brought up, because if you think about it, look at the size of these industries relatively. The theater industry 100 years ago, that was the game in town for entertainment, right? Now look at it today. It still exists. It's still expensive, but it's a premium niche product. It's not the industry at all. It's a very minor component of the industry. And simply because you can get a massive amount of entertainment from a $10 movie ticket, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This is literally $100 million production where you spend $10 and you get to enjoy that $100 million put forward for you.
Yeah.
In like a complete recliner in your couch at home, if you're right. So what that kind of also means, though, is it kind of brings a new light to the term starving artist, right? Because it's not an industry that has necessarily prospered, right? If you think about it, the theater industry, it's still there, but it's a very small component. And again, I think it has put downward price pressure on entertainers who are doing theater. They're not the ones who are making
Yeah.
the big bucks these days. And it makes that type of living harder to compete. So yeah, it'll probably exist at a de minimis level, but not at a level where we can say, hey, this is a good prospering way to continue. Or it feels like it's a lot more challenging if you want to go down that type of route. And I think this applies to almost all these careers that we talked about, including ours, right? To be honest, right? Like I mentioned, it seems like it's not really a question of if these things are possible. It's more of a question of when. Like, what's the stacking order on this? On a long enough timeline, everything could potentially fall under this change.
Okay, so I kind of agree with. I think those are good guesses. I don't like calling them anything more than that, but that idea, like, we'll see that YouTube/Netflix custom creation, and some things will become more popular than others. That appeals to more people. Like that, this person was a little bit more creative than I was for myself, and I like that. They had the slightly better inputs that produced a slightly more interesting thing. And like, there's personal tastes and that kind of thing exists, but it doesn't cost that creator anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever the costs for your Netflix subscription to make your own movie.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really cost them anything, and so it shouldn't cost me very much to also watch that person's thing. And I can see that becoming kind of larger. I can see there's a split between scale, like scaled productions for kind of any profession, that most of the things that most people get will be automated. So financial advice for 95% of the country becomes more automated. There's enough systems in place, enough education. Like you're already saving into your 401k. You need to save this much and do this thing. And people sign up and they pay $10-$20 a month for their AI financial advisor. But there's still a decent chance that 5%, maybe less, maybe up to 10%, like of each individual thing will become that niche product, that it is a little more creative. And actually, like, another thing I had written down, like, was being a chef. And like I can see every fast food place can be replaced by robots because it's the same recipe. But if you want that creative meal, you have to be willing to pay more for the chef.
Right.
And the next level of this is kind of something you've mentioned to me, of like, when it comes to like just basic economic terms of capital and labor, the capital sounds like it's going to do just fine. The owners of the technology, like the person who puts on that theater with the robot, whoever owns that $10 robot and can put together the show, like, while they might only collect $1 per person, you get enough people in there, and it's like, that's how scales work. That's why $100 million movie can cost $10. So this brings us to like the next stage of our conversation, the next big question, kind of a more practical side of like, we can already see this splitting happen in society today. And you mentioned, it's like the rich getting richer, and wage growth hasn't outpaced inflation for a generation. And so if we project this farther, where most labor is unnecessary, how do we prevent a dystopian society of like that you see in every sci-fi movie of the future.
Yeah, right. So that's the big conundrum that I think we're going to have to deal with as a society. And to shine a greater light on it's been going on for the past 50, 100 years, but it's just going to accelerate. It's one of those things where early on you don't really see the impact because you're riding an exponential curve, but you're still on the flat part, right? But we're about to hit that tipping point, it seems. And we've certainly seen that happen over the last generation. As you just mentioned, we have talked about this in a good amount of detail in many of the past episodes. The notion that wealth inequality has been accelerating over the past generation. And, to shine some numbers on it, just for context, so that we can take it to the next level. Again, this is stuff we have talked about, but here's a quick kind of recap. Let's see here. All right, so we can have us in the corner, or we don't need us. Okay, so let's see if I can make this bigger for those listening. I'll talk to it for our listeners. All right, so the share of income that households generates, well, there's been a shift over the past generation where the upper income levels, basically, they've been earning more. The middle income levels, they've been earning less after you adjust for inflation, meaning in real terms, their incomes are going down. And the lower income levels have also been going down. This is kind of the squeezing of the middle class that we always hear about. And yes, it is happening. To put it in a little bit more context, this chart here shows the overall household wealth in this blue line over the past generation or so, since 1990 till 2020. And what we see is this line of massive wealth creation, where the total household wealth was in the late 80s about 40 trillion, and now it's like 122 trillion. So a 3x increase in wealth. That's tremendous.
122. Is that trillion?
It should be trillion. These should be millions.
In thousands?
These are billions. Each one.
Okay.
So this is 100.
Yeah, I think it's 122 billion.
Okay, sorry, billion.
Household net worth by income group. Yeah.
We'll get that right in the show notes. But it's a 3x increase in overall wealth.
Yeah.
And, we would say, hey, great. We're all 3 times better off in a generation. Wonderful. But you kind of break down where all that wealth went, and essentially all of it went to the wealthy.
Yeah.
All, like every penny, and then some. So the notion is things have gone extremely well for an increase in productivity, but it's kind of all been sapped by the owners of the wealth, right? The owners of the stocks, essentially.
Yeah.
Or the owners of the businesses. And all of this innovation hasn't really led to the point where the average person is that much more wealthy than they were. And you can imagine the same amount of unlocking of potential wealth is going to happen for the next generation, because, again, there's been a huge increase in automation and robotics and streamlining that we already mentioned. And this is going to happen to the next order of magnitude. And there's no reason why the wealth should get distributed if the same system is in place that leads to the inequalities that we're talking about. And right now, there's no real impetus for that change, and no real change that's on the horizon. It's something we mentioned in many of our past episodes.
So basically, like, beyond implementing a universal basic income, a UBI, or a negative income tax, something like that, is that, like, do we just have to get there, or do you have any other ideas?
Well, okay, so some other things have happened, though, over the past generation, which are definitely a good thing. So these increases in productivity has driven down a large portion of our costs that we end up bearing. So, for example, many products are a lot cheaper today than they used to be a generation ago.
Okay.
Electronics, computers, TVs, there's been a lot of deflationary pressure because of this increase in technology.
And we talk like, especially after you account for the increases in like value and technology received. Like even if the actual price of the car that you're buying today is greater than the price of a car in 1990, the technology in the car is so much more valuable. You're much safer, you're much more fuel efficient, the audio systems are so much better. Like there's so many other convenience and technology built in that it's hard to you can't just look at just the price of the car. It's if you tried to buy a car today, even though they don't even make them, like they had all the same things as a car in 1990, it would be incredibly cheap. And so that's how car companies have been able to make more money. It's just they've made better and better products. So after you account for those increases in benefits, cars and TVs and computers have been deflationary.
Right. So there's a good amount of impact that we've all enjoyed in a positive way for the reduction in prices for many things that we do care about. But then what's the problem, right? Where's the big issue? And we've talked about this in the past. There's been a few core areas where expenses have increased up and beyond inflation to kind of eat up all of the benefit from everything else and then some. So the big three that we've mentioned in the past is that housing prices, education, and healthcare. All those three have basically sucked up any gains that the end consumer, on average, has seen from the deflationary pressure of everything else. And what does that mean? For example, a generation ago, housing, education, and healthcare comprised about a third of household spending. And now it's 60 to 70%. Because again, if you have something that's outpacing inflation, then it's going to start eating into the overall pie. And the comment that we've said in the past is if the same level of outpacing happens for one more generation, you literally can't spend more than 100% on these three things and have a society that functions.
So I remember, I think last time we talked about, I was influenced by Brian Westbury from First Trust, I believe. He made a presentation at one of the conferences I attended, and he talked about the idea that those things have been subsidized by the government. And so there is less competition, less effort to drive down prices in those particular areas than in things like cars, computers. And as I think about now, especially relative to our earlier conversation, I also think that those things can't scale. You can't have one doctor seeing 5 patients at the same time. You can't have one plot of land, like especially based on location, serve like everyone can't have their own single family home on the same space. Everyone can't have their own backyard. So like you can scale property. So like when there's more building, especially in higher density areas, that's one of the ways to reduce real estate costs. But if you want a single family home, there's only so much land in the area that you want to be that's a part of the reason why we're driving that up. So so maybe like that's like, I guess if there's more building, especially being in California, that's a big topic for conversation of zoning issues and not in my backyard, so NIMBY. So like, yes, we should build more housing. No, not here, over there.
Right.
And like, because if it's doing it here, it's really inconvenient to me. But over there, it works for everyone else. It works for me and everyone else around me. Like those people can deal with it. So like there's been a big issue of restrictions on building. That's part of the reason why California home prices have gone up so much. And we're actually just starting to see some state laws that cities need to be more lax and change their zoning, or the state of California is going to take over zoning for those cities. But we'll see how that plays out. But it's like just that the three things you said, like education, healthcare, and uh, um, real estate, like those have been going up dramatically. Like, and education, like we're just on the cusp of, can we scale that? And maybe if technology comes in and like means that the AI doctor can see 5 or 100 patients at once. So it's like I do wonder like how much of those is just scaling.
Yeah, I think that has been the struggle the past generation for those three things: the scaling issue, the fact that these three have had subsidies that may not have been beneficial, or frankly, there's this level of bureaucracy that's been in
Yeah.
place for these three that have kind of grinded the gears of efficiency from doing their job. That's kind of another way to think about it.
Yeah, like a lot of the increased costs in medicine are going to like hospital administrators or something like that. Like there's been studies on that. And there's also kind of research with education, like especially for elementary, like class size makes a big difference. And so they're just trying to hire more teachers at the same cost, but it's no, they can't quite make it as attractive a profession necessary to get more people to become teachers without really increasing pay.
Yeah,
So yeah.
But as you said, I think all three of those, with enough time and technology, are also likely on the chopping block for having a
We go
good
like a
sense of.
Khan Academy style of teaching that can scale,
Sure, yeah.
or even some AI teachers.
Why not? Yeah, why can't you have your own personal AI teacher that can teach you anything you ever want, right?
Yeah.
And can hold you accountable and whatever it takes. It give you exams that are whatever, adapt their learning to whatever fits you best, right? So education, sure. I think that's certainly on the chopping block. We talked about healthcare, with the AI doctors and stuff like that. Why not there as well, right? And it's one of those things where it will likely be in stages where initially it might just be on the diagnosis side, and then it might be on the next level of care, and then eventually everything, right? Once you have the robots walking around. And then housing, now that's an interesting one, because I think there's even pressure there. The big one that I see coming with that is a lot of reason why housing has inflated the way it is because it made a lot of sense to be in a particular location for two reasons. One, you wanted to be close to where your job is because you have to go into some sort of office. Well, if a lot of pressure is moving to work from home, then there's less pressure to have to be located where your job needs to be. So in a virtual employment situation, sure. And if nobody's working anyway,
that's kind of my thought. Like we're saying like all the labor's gone. So
so yeah, you live wherever you want. And the other thing is with like driverless cars and stuff like that, it doesn't matter where your house is, or it matters less where your house is if you can have the car send you wherever you want and you wake up in the morning wherever you need to be, right? For vacation or whatever it happens to be. So I think there will be pressure there as well.
Okay, so I guess, are you saying that like the income inequality is less of a concern because everything will be cheaper? So like as incomes go down with respect to inflation, like just wage growth, that's fine because everything else is getting cheaper?
So here's the dynamic in play. We don't know who's going to win out first, but the long game is essentially the game that we've been playing all along with innovation. And these points we've mentioned before, the marginal cost of information is close to nothing, right? At this point, you can get any information you want for free on your smartphone, right? And at that point, I mentioned this before, marginal cost of energy can go to zero with enough advancement. So your energy is covered, your information is covered, education, marginal cost can go to zero, right? And then,
So I think that's actually like I want to add. I'm going to separate knowledge from education, and this is similar to I don't know when we talked about it, but that idea it was like who's going to cheat versus who's going to put in the effort. Um, I think we're just starting to see like behavior change ideas. Of like we need the technology to make us eat healthier and exercise more so that medical care costs go down, and the technology to actually make sure we study the homework and do the tests. And so like there's still that parent, teacher, coach, whether it could be a doctor, but like that influence to get you to make better decisions. That's going to be a component of what AI would need to get to as well. And we're like barely starting to see the beginning of that, but that's why I would separate like the knowledge from the education.
yeah. But the point is, even the education side of it can be automated to the point where the marginal cost of receiving that guidance, that one-on-one guidance, is close to nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, what that likely means is all consumer expenses can drop to close to nothing. But how do you afford even that de minimis amount if you have no income to begin with?
Yeah. That was one thought. My also thought was like, if I'm imagining like the chef with the nice restaurant still exists because every chain restaurant is robots with the same recipe. Like, who pays? Is it just like whoever's wealthy now is wealthy 2 generations from now, and they're just like living off trust funds?
Well, interestingly enough, the things that you mentioned, like the theater and the restaurant, those do cater towards, frankly, the wealthy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very likely that the wealthy will have extra money to spend, and they will spend extra money on those things.
So okay, so that goes back to like, okay, so now there is still like it's almost like optional work, I guess I'd say. Like if you don't want to, like I can see like some super small UBI coming into play, and like this is enough to cover your housing, your food, enough entertainment. You can kind of do whatever you want.
Right.
But it's like, but you can't afford any of those high-end niche things. But if you want to be a server in that high-end restaurants because they're intentionally not using robots, like you can be that chef, you can be the server, you can be the maitre d', and like those jobs will exist. And then you are earning enough where you could, like, again, there'll be a scale of
it's an interesting dynamic once you get to that level, because at the end of the day, a large part of the wealth that pushes the wealthy forward is driven by consumer spending, right? Spending from the average person. But if they don't have wealth to spend because they don't need wealth to spend, or it's a little interesting, right? But also the other part of the end game is, if you can have everything you need to live a comfortable life at a marginal cost of nothing, what do you do with your life, right?
Yes, that was my other kind of big question in my mind. Like I don't want to go down the like, how do you feel fulfilled path? Because that's a full. I love that conversation, but it's not today's conversation. What do you do to feel fulfilled?
Well, so the high level bullet point on that is, in the past, a large part of our fulfillment was our employment. Right?
Yes.
And it served two purposes. It made us happy because we were being productive, but it also made ends meet. If ends no longer need to be met, well, then does that reduce the level of purpose for employment in general?
Yeah.
And the way I kind of think about it is the race towards financial independence is often to the point of making employment optional or recreational, right? That's what we kind of see it as. So at this point, or there could be a point where that happens for a large majority of the population, if not the vast majority, and they're able to obtain that at day one, which is fine. But then the notion is, okay, what do you do with your time?
Yeah.
And I think that could be a double-edged sword, right? It could
Yeah.
open up the opportunity for humans to just explore things that aren't driven to monetization, right?
Yeah.
That's a big part of what's driven our focus and attention for, and monetization. I mean, covering the stuff to survive.
Yeah.
That's what survival has been all about for the past millions of years, right? But now it's more, or the transition is now you can do what your interests lead you to do that aren't financially motivated. In fact, they probably can't be financially motivated
Yeah.
anymore, right? Like, for example, even though I have some sense of financial independence, I'm doing stuff that does have a financial bearing to it. But that might not be possible. It might just come down to really what are my interests? And even though it has no monetization capability, it would still be stuff that provides me with a sense of well-being.
Yeah.
Which I think is certainly possible. I think it's certainly possible to get there.
So it's like a very optimistic take of where like income inequality is like shooting across, like farther and farther apart. But does it matter? Because everyone gets to do whatever they want. It's like everyone's happier and society's still better off, even though we never actually bothered to solve income inequality and wealth inequality.
Right. There are a few end games to this, right? Many dystopian, but I'm an
it's like
optimist.
you get like revolution. You get to like drugs and alcohol problems with enough society. Like too large of society just becomes sedentary. It's like the there was one nice extreme was Wall-E. Do you remember the movie where
yeah,
every
sure.
human is just sitting in their recliner, just
Yeah.
getting fatter and fatter as the recliner takes them around? Like they're talking to their friends, like literally next to each other, but they're still through the screen. So like that's still like the happy dystopian side. And there's been other movies of like there's a Justin Timberlake movie where they had like time on their wrists or something like that, and like the wealthy just had infinite amount of time. But there's been other movies of like the worst case scenarios of this kind of income inequality.
Right. Yeah. So we even see it today. At the end of the day, income inequality is at its worst, but with median household income, you can live better than the richest king did 400 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. I'd be. It's like it feels like it comes back to our philosophy conversation for a couple episodes ago. It's like, is it free will or determinism? It's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like,
just enjoy it.
Is it wealth inequality or everything gets everyone for free? It's like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you can lead yourself into like an existential crisis, or you can just accept it and say,
it's like, I'm gonna go for a walk.
I'll watch Netflix. Let me binge a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Been thinking about the next episode I haven't gotten to yet. The previous was on a cliffhanger. That'll probably be part of the algorithms. It's like every episode of everything created ever has a cliffhanger at the end.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're gonna know us a lot better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
And but the hope is that we can engineer them so that they can make us better humans.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the second half of our conversation ended up being more fun than I thought.
Right. Good stuff, Aaron.
Yeah, this is a good one. So I think we're done with robots are here. What does this mean for society? I think we'll move on to something else next time.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think that my high level takeaway is there's going to be a lot of advancement, a lot of innovation, a lot of disruption. But, the optimist in me says that it's probably going to be something that is going to provide more benefit than harm by a good degree.
Yeah. I keep reminding, like, we've talked about Kinder's 3 questions. I use that with my clients, but like, how are you going to spend your time? The people who are going to do well, both now and in the future, are ones who make intentional decisions for how they're going to spend their time in their life. And it feels like that is currently the case, and it's also going to be the case hundreds of years from now when robots are doing all the work.
Well, I hope when the robots take over, you and I can still have some of these conversations.
See, that's my point. Like, we don't need to monetize this to enjoy the conversation. That's how I want to spend my time.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay. I think I'm going to wrap up there.
All right. Well, sounds good. I enjoyed this as well. And thanks everybody for listening and watching. And do subscribe, like, share, forward, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.
Bye. We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.